Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavang, it does. They need me.
Welcome, End of Dragons Daily 74. Well, it's been a pretty insane couple of days. I actually didn't do an End of Dragons Daily yesterday just because I wanted to let things settle a little bit. And in addition, I did have like a 2-hour-long video discussing the balance with boots. So, you know, I don't want to be too overwhelming to people. Today, though, we're jumping back into the topic of the most recent release and how that has impacted us for End of Dragons. And this has been kind of funny. You know, I could have picked reams and reams, comment after comment of people talking about how disappointed they've been with this release. I could have picked reams and reams of comments of people saying that it's actually the best release ever and it's terrible for me to attack it and I shouldn't betray the franchise to earn a quick buck off of the negativity, or that I should be better than this because I'm an ArenaNet partner, which means by default I have to be shilling for the product. But instead of that, I figure, you know, we all generally know the score. A lot of us have commented. If we haven't commented for ourselves, we've definitely been reading comments and response. So I kind of want to go for some slightly more obscure, different responses and things that really made me think, oh, yeah, that's quite interesting. Footage in the background is going to be Drizzlewood. Now, there's a lot that I could talk about here as well, in fact. I shot it a couple of days ago now, so before too many facts slip out of my head, what I'm doing here is playing with the graphics and trying to utilize the new rig, which, by the way, I still want to get you guys a picture of and talk about a little bit more. I've got a graphics video coming out at some point soon. But what you want to be paying attention to is this is a zero culling Drizzlewood, so you'll see everything. And I'm playing with some of the other parameters to try and give the system enough headroom to really have it work. You're really, even on a beast PC like this, it's still dropping down to 20 in any kind of intense action moment, if not more. So if it looks a bit choppy, sorry about that. What I've also done, though, is, you know, I've hit the reflections and I've hit the shadows and I've tried to create that space so it will still look good. Even then, I think the balance is a bit iffy. It's kind of beautiful, though, in a lot of ways. And I don't know how much of the footage you guys will be able to see. Maybe I'll super speed it a bit for yourself. That would obscure the low frame rate in some ways. But you should check out what it looks like when we're in some of those later instances. It's a Drizzlewood South, not North. And when everyone's firing the Charzookas at the helicopter and nobody's cold. And by the way, no effect LOD on either. Most of the time when you watch ultra footage of the game, or people who dare to play with no culling, they all put effect LOD on. I don't even have that, so you truly do just see the explosive, disgusting mess of animations, which generally for fights is terrible if you're trying to participate in the fight. But if you're standing back and watching, it looks really good sometimes. The helicopter moment's incredible. The other thing that's really striking is sky scales. My God, I know that most of the time when I read a comment about the sky scale, it's people saying the sky scale is too hard to get. But when I look in game at moments like this, it makes me realize a lot of people who are actively actually in there playing the product, they have sky scales and they're everywhere. You know, there's a moment in the footage you'll see where we're capturing one of the camps and we've got to hit the sniper boss, a Vision, I think it is. And you'll just see she's getting swarmed by just countless sky scales flying around, not to mention their really massive flame AoE attacks. It's really kind of crazy to see. There's a lot of other weird little things going on in the footage that I had in mind as I was shooting it, and really could have just done a commentary track entirely about. So hopefully you enjoy this one, and you know, we'll have more relevant stuff as well. I might sneak in some footage of Liz at some point. Maybe you've already seen it at the start. I'm trying to give her a kind of a new appearance, like a black mage outfit. I've always had a Final Fantasy inspired white mage outfit for her, but now with the chocobo in the game and with the glyphic backpack that you can go with the new infusions for fire and frost that stack with a headpiece, I'm thinking I can do like a witch's hat black mage appearance where one of my eyes is glowing. I think that could work quite well, kind of like the Final Fantasy 1 black mage or Vivi from 9. So we'll see. Anyway, the other big topic is this, the concept art for today. Now, I didn't really get any comments, at least that I saw. You might have just been drowned out in the cavalcade of other messages. I didn't really see any of your commentary on this, but this is the second shot we've got. And first question, I guess, is to guess where this is. And it's funny because my instinct is to say Echovalve. The lighting feels very Echovalve and so on. But it's also kind of weird. It almost looks like a dried up lake, doesn't it? Or seabed of some kind. Like these sort of circular structures, semicircle stuck into the wall here. They could be petrified mushrooms and the whole stone spore thing that we had a discussion on before, in which case I'm really kind of into that. On the other hand, though, it kind of looks like a dusty plateau that was once underwater, and that's like almost evokes a sense of coral to me. And maybe this is long after the Luxons mined away all the jade here at some quarry or something. I admit that second argument I've given you there is a lot weaker, so I really do think Echovald is probably the bigger point. And then you might say, all right, well, what's this doorway? The doorway you'd probably presume to be something the Kurzik's built. But you know what this makes me think of immediately? And it touches on kind of a theory we've had popping up every now and then through End of Dragons Daily. It's the idea that there is a part of Glint's legacy still awaiting Cantha. Like, if the devs are doing the story and the lore right here, it really would make sense that Glint talked to Kunavang at some point about her plans. I mean, just that idea of these two dragons sharing a scene together. Because despite the fact that they were together in the first game, they never shared any screen space. We never heard about them interacting in any way. To me, that's a really exciting beat that I want to be explored. And it makes sense that they would talk to each other about this. They're both powerful dragons existing at the same time, presumably know something about the Elder Dragons together, and, you know, are sympathetic to the cause of mortal races. So I think that, you know, Glint would have gone to Kunavang, and hopefully Kunavang said yes to Glint's legacy and has been working away, somewhat like how we realized in Path of Fire that Vlast has been traveling around doing loads of stuff, has been an active dragon. We just didn't hear about it. What's been going on actively in Cantha? And does that mean the construction of another city? Kesho was buried beneath the sands in Path of Fire. Is there a city buried within the Echovald Forest or deep below the Jade somehow? I mean, below the Jade's kind of an interesting one. So that's what this makes me think of. Is this another hidden city? And, you know, are there Exalted beyond that door? It does make me think of Kesho to a certain degree. It also, very weirdly, and I doubt this is connected, but in the deep raid, essentially, elite mission from Guild Wars 1, there was a big door you could see off in the distance, but never actually access. It makes me think of that to a certain degree as well, but I'm sure it's really not related anyway. So that's what strikes me about this art. You got to remember as well, the idea that maybe this is some kind of Kesho equivalent. They've released these pieces of concept art, and they generally, you know, have some breadth over the whole expansion. They're showing different stuff. We already had one of Echovald. Would they really just give us 2 generic pieces about Echovald? Maybe they would. But I think this is more precisely, hey, guys, look at this door. What's behind the door? The door is important. And, you know, the other thing as well to think of is all this art is very likely to appear as a loading screen somewhere, whether that be an open world map or a story instance. I can picture it, a story instance in which we're traveling to another part of Glint's legacy, a new city, more Exalted, whatever's going on there, and this is a loading screen taking us in. Those are my ideas on that one. Back to Drizzlewood and the topic at hand of the future following this patch. First we have Javier, who says, about my pronunciation here, guys. It wouldn't be my channel if we weren't messing up. I think that they'll give us some events during these 3 months that Aurene warned us about wild magic running rampant and telling us to be ready to act at any moment. And Kaj Hall says exactly what I was thinking, but I'm hesitant to pin my hopes on it because the chapter physically finished. Green Star and all appeared on the screen. In the previous releases, that Green Star didn't appear once. The first part of the episode ended, or did it? Maybe I'm misremembering. So I do actually believe in this. I really do. There's no epilogue. There's no nothing. The devs know that this isn't good. I don't know whether I really expressed this well enough in the recent videos, but they know. You know, that's why the blog post came out at the same time. That's why you get a mail with some free Ascended gear and, you know, them saying thanks for supporting us in these difficult times. That's why they gave us not 1, but 2 Blackline keys. Sometimes they'll give you a Blackline key, you know, as a hook, get you in on that gambling. They gave you 2 for free. It's because they know it's low quality and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be established. Now, let's look at the time frames. There's 3 months to come. There's going to be some kind of wrapper story around the Marionette's return and whatever else they have planned. After the live stream talking about End of Dragons, we might be in a world where it comes out really quickly afterwards. Or more realistically, you're looking at another 2 or even 3 months following July 29th before the expansion comes. Now, those 3 months, maybe the game doesn't get much. Maybe it's all about End of Dragons press, and I think that's kind of okay. That's kind of the Heart of Thorns content style situation, but it's kind of okay. On the other hand, I think that they'll probably put story that slowly seeps in throughout here. More meetings with Aurene, where maybe, you know, we get something at the Scram Port. I'm not saying full-fledged missions. I'm not saying that they'll go big with any of it, but especially talking about the idea of little chats between patches. We have already seen this. That's what the Bangar conversations did. Remember, the Icebrood Saga just had Ryland becoming the champion and a glimpse of Jormag. And then there was quite a wait where it was just, this was not a formal Living World patch. It was little conversations with Bangar just slowly dropping in. That's what I expect. I expect a little conversation, or even several, with Aurene, talking about how she missed some of the magic or it flew through her, and, you know, hinting about the deep sea dragon. Probably a great time to be explicit about whether Aurene knows of its existence, and if she doesn't, what are we going to have Timey come in and teach her about it? That'd be kind of a fun one to see the community's response, I mean, specifically. I think they'll do that. I think we'll have a little moment with Bangar for sure. Or this is what I'd like anyway. They also pointed the finger at the Crystal Bloom and Kaith a bit towards the end there. So, you know, these are the things I would expect. We're looking at 5 to 6 months, guys. You're going to get these things. The Marionette's a funny one because I really can't tie the Marionette into any of this right now. And I appreciate that the Marionette, in theory, all the assets are there, a lot of the music's there, a lot of what's interesting has already been done, the design work. So that it's less work because it's the matter of porting it to the game as it is now rather than anything else. I appreciate that that's an efficient update to put in, and it's in service of Living World Season 1. But there is a big part of me right now that's like, man, don't do the Marionette. All the efforts you just put on the Marionette should have been on this release, and this release should have come out 6 to, 10 weeks later. That's really how I feel. Because you can't tie the Marionette into what's currently going on, can you? Unless, again, it's what I vaguely mentioned before about the Dredge. Now that there's no Primordus, the Dredge are galvanized and they rebuild it or something. I don't know. But either way, it doesn't really progress the big, important, big-ticket plots, does it? But I do think we'll get something for sure, even if it's just little conversations. Let's hope the devs can go further. Next, we got Ryan B. The final climax was rushed, and I was disappointed they didn't flesh out Primordus a bit more. But it hasn't hampered my excitement for End of Dragons. I feel like if ArenaNet really tries, Bubbles can end up showing us the consequences of our own actions by killing Morgemorth, Jormag, Primordus, Zaitan, and Kralkatorrik. That's one powerful dragon. Having this amped up dragon be almost impossible to kill and causes the commander and friends to realize they've doomed Tyria for killing the dragons, losing faith, and pushing Aurene to understand she can't stand idle could do wonders for character development. In the end, Aurene realizes the only way to save Tyria and the world is to sacrifice herself and force herself to fight the deep sea dragon. They kill each other as both are amped up with dragon magic. The wild magic returns to the land, causing unheard of cataclysm, and once again sharpening the point that killing the Elder Dragons was a bad idea. And now Tyria is paying the price. Then boom, Guild Wars 3 happens, or we get one last expansion that involves trying to contain the magic and rebuild Tyria, or that just ends the Guild Wars franchise, and ArenaNet gets to move on to creating a new franchise, basically pulling a Final Fantasy XIV, destroying everything. Also, 3rd generation legendaries, yes please. It's interesting you mentioned FF14 there, because the whole Comet thing and the Battle of Katano there, that informs the future storylines in a big way. They didn't do a clean break with FF14. They did a big inciting incident that a lot of the story is revolved around following. But to talk specifically about your ideas here, and the idea that it hasn't hampered your excitement for End of Dragons, I actually am inclined to agree. Because when I look at Path of Fire, when I look at Season 3, when I look at Season 4, when I look at this team, this talent, and I don't believe that there's been that much brain drain in the time since, when they are not being flung from side to side by crazy management decisions and, controversial moves, when they are actually given the time to do the stuff, I actually think that whole era of the game was brilliant. And I think for all of its faults and its restricted size, Heart of Thorns even still did a lot of really fantastic stuff and is a high quality experience. And so I look at End of Dragons in the same way. I do think that we're going to get something good here. We have definitely lost something permanently, and this release has really, really crippled a lot about what I enjoy with the game. But in terms of how much does this affect the future quality, I'm not that concerned. I do now have concerns that I shouldn't listen to ArenaNet if they tried to set up a story too far in advance. Like the ending scene of Eye of the North not really paying off in any way, not even the Scepter of Ore and all that stuff. It's happened too many times that they've not really been able to deliver. So, and everything I said in my previous video, why should I believe them when it comes to a stinger scene from End of Dragons teasing Guild Wars 3? I'm not going to trust that very much. But the actual quality of this X-Pack as it is, I still have reasonable hopes, and there is kind of a silver lining to all of this in their uncompromising decision to still kill off these 2 dragons even though they clearly didn't have the budget for it. It must mean whatever they've got planned is pretty good, right? At least they're sticking to their guns. You know, there's kind of something unfair going on with the studio right now, where dicks like me can come along and say, oh my god, this was a terrible patch, this was awful, and, you know, we can rock the boat. And ArenaNet can't really defend themselves because their defense is the quality of End of Dragons. You know, the way they justify this patch is to say, well, look, it was so that we can do this in End of Dragons. They had to be dead because this is what's happening in End of Dragons. Look at how fucking cool this is in End of Dragons. And we don't want to make you wait till 2023 for it. It's happening, man. And this is why we made this trade. They can't make that argument until the expansion's out. So they're in limbo for now. You know, and I think there is a cynic in me that wonders whether they'll ever be able to pay this price. But the silver lining is what they've done does demonstrate some confidence somewhere further up the chain, you know? And maybe we can look to that confidence. As for your specific ideas about what should happen in End of Dragons, I have to say I don't really agree. You've just described the Icebreed Saga and 2 supercharged Elder Dragons fighting one another and both of them die at the same time. Also, you're setting up this thing where it's like, that's supposed to have been a bad move, right? You want this expansion to nail in the idea that it was terrible to kill the Elder Dragons. But then you've just told me that what you're really doing is setting up a new status quo in which the free peoples of Tyria can operate, which doesn't really even sound that bad to me. So, you know, I wouldn't be able to buy that was a big sacrifice we had made. The one thing I think you probably are right about, though, is Aureen's death at the end of it. And in fact, guys, I think that Aureen is going to be, if not the final boss of this expansion, like a boss battle against Aureen, and she's the best Elder Dragon fight we've ever had. Oh my god. And the reason I say that is because she's actually smaller, so it's probably a bit more manageable. If she's not the final boss, I think she's probably like the penultimate boss. And, you know, she is there in the climax. And I think she's against us. I think all these little messages we may be getting over the next 5 to 6 months possibly will deal with her going a bit nuts. I did read on a Reddit thread quite recently, someone pulled dialogue from Season 4, start to guide us, when Aureen started really dealing with the fact that she was probably going to have to take all this magic, and Glint was talking to her basically. In that instance, in Season 4, they had some really good, accurate dialogue about how Aureen's job is to take the magic for herself and to have the wisdom to know when to share it and when to hoard it, and to not just hoard it all the time as all the other Elder Dragons do. That's the real story. Those are the real beats which the Icebreed Saga failed in not talking about in any way. But hopefully End of Dragons gets back to that stuff, and these little mini conversations I now anticipate us getting will hopefully do with that. But the whole idea of Dragon Madness and everything that kind of got kicked up with the first Raid Wings, Matthias, Bloodstone Fen, I think we're heading into that now. I believe that's always been the end game, and we're starting to reach it. I was a bit of a dumbass. I asked you guys why the hell the patch was called Judgment. Well, some of you guys had good ideas. I'm picking the comment here from the Mr. Blaze, and this is not the most eloquent or fleshed out response. I know several of you guys gave much better ones. This is the first one I found today. I think it's called Judgment. It's alluding to Ryland's mother judging him, finally, and telling him she wished he didn't become this way. Yeah, I think you're totally right. The Judgment title is really about the Ryland stuff. I haven't talked enough about how much I really do like those beats. Seriously. Kreesha is brutal in that. These are proper char. And the disregard she shows for her own cub excellently counterbalance what's going on with Ritlock at the same time. I really, really think they nailed this arc. At least they nailed this. And it's not just about Kreesha's judgment for Ryland, but I think it's Ryland always wanting to be judged as something great. You know, his pursuit of greatness was what undermined him in the end. And that's the tragedy of that story. And there's something real that they're driving at about ambition and becoming lost in it and so on, which I think all ties into the subheader of the release. So yes, it does work, and it was clearly about that storyline. Someone had a joke that it was about the judgment of a mother, but because this was the mother of all disappointments. I enjoyed that as well, whoever that was. Next, we've got Rick Jeb, who says, I posted this to Discord as well, but the idea was on YouTube, so here we go. I feel personally, the more the story goes on, the more the world building is sacrificed for easy plot development and or character development. Some things in the plot just feel so detached from the world. All the things that happen as the direct plot, it does not feel like there's stuff going on in the background. So many power vacuums were caused by the deaths of major characters, Joko mainly, to be honest. I feel like nothing's done with it. I think what's happening to the Flame Legion is the stuff I want to see more of. Not directly the storyline, just how they handle it. It's clear they're going through a development, but it's not like we're on a crusade to get that development finished. It runs in the background, and occasionally we get news or it impacts the main plot, it also adds more meaning to what we did in the personal story, so there are consequences to our actions. Essentially, I think a summary of the problem is that only the direct consequences of our actions have impact, but the subtle things that happen in the background are discarded. However, I think little depth to the actions going on to the plot is not the only problem. The state of how magic operates is horrible. The limits on what magic can do and cannot do are not established. It's not only magic in general, but also the individual systems. We do not know if Aurene can use ley lines to overload the deep sea dragon and kill it in a single attack. We do not know if Aurene can absorb all the magic without problems. By the way, they're kind of playing with that. I don't really view that as a valid criticism. We do not know if Aurene can teleport to the mists and beyond, or if she's bound to Tyrion in some way. Maybe Aurene can change the fundamental constants, like pi with magic, and cause everything to stop existing. We just don't know. It's not that we need to know all the maths and mechanics and science, but I certainly feel right now anything can happen if the writers want it to happen, and that seriously hurts the world building. Like, just having a form of power levels would be nice. It's become less and less clear how strong elder dragons actually are. We just do not know. For example, the human gods have reference points. We know that what happens if Cormyr did not absorb Abaddon. We know what Balthazar was able to do in early history. We also know that the gods have created multiple powerful artifacts and basically nuked entire regions of the world in just a duel. It sort of gives us an idea of what's possible, but personally, I don't know what elder dragons can do. And then the last paragraph is repeated, I guess. Yeah, I think you're really onto something. You know, the intangibles with which the devs use as leverage to concoct endings is a big problem for Guild Wars. It has been for a long time. I would actually argue, and this almost got into my Guild Wars 2 Lowlights video, that it started in Season 2 when they started giving us the vague ideas that dragons have two aspects, and then that kind of rears its ugly head again in Heart of Thorns, where it turns out, oh, this is Pokemon and something's going to be super effective against all of them. Even, actually, I'm probably being too sympathetic. Even the Zaitan arc, which, again, I will cut you, if you've seen my personal story playthrough, you know what I think about that. You know that I do value it in a great many ways. But, frankly, even with all the screen time they had and all the opportunity they had to play around, they still didn't really dive in as deeply as they could and should have with the whole gore, corrupting magic, poisoning it, throwing it back at Zaitan and having his own hunger, you know, sort of be his undoing and stuff. You know, they really never laid out tangibles with the magic system. Season 2 comes in with a bunch of new writers as well, and the Season 1 stuff with the whole ley line thing. And yeah, I think it's too convoluted, and it is important that we know what the stakes are. It is important to know exactly what these things can do, because it throws our expectations awry. Like, when I'm disappointed that Primordus died here because he never had a victory, well, he did have victories. He sent destroyers around the world. He, in the fight, threw like big rocks, which did a bit of damage to me. Maybe if my expectations weren't that he could destroy the world, I'd be happy with that. But my expectations were that he'd be doing stuff like Zaitan rising a continent. Shouldn't he conflagrate a continent? Shouldn't we hear that maybe he's responsible for the downfall of the Isles of Janthera or something? You know, so I asked for a victory, and maybe he did. It's because my expectations are out of sync, because it's hard to know what to expect. And I really do try to shy away from this, but this is basically just a result of I think, the studio not seriously brainstorming the fundamentals of this franchise and what the hell is the story they're trying to tell early enough. And then they kind of have to use this vagueness as a tool to get them out of situations. And this is not new to this patch. This has been a thing for a very, very long time. As for your other stuff about, oh, you know, the Flame Legion, and we're kind of hearing a bit about them, but we're not rushing through it. This is something we talked about on End of Dragons Daily before. I completely agree. And to me, what this comes down to is ArenaNet's bar is too high in terms of like what they have taught players to expect the composition of a patch playthrough to be. Now, I was very wordy, but what do I mean by this? Well, we're all familiar with one thing. The patches in general aren't big enough. Not just patches, but expansions. They are too small and narrow. So they don't deliver enough story to explore the concepts they've been tasked with. The random NPCs you might be able to speak to often don't provide enough value. They don't leverage the lore book UI, which I wanted in the game for so long, precisely to tackle this issue, regularly enough. And when they do, the books are often too short and completely irrelevant for the Golden Path story. There isn't enough story delivered without voice acting. There isn't enough story that isn't hidden away in dynamic events that you might miss. Some of these problems are solvable within the game as it exists. A lot of these issues are resolved with some kind of traditional questing system, which of course we're all familiar with. But if you look closer than this at the surface, and you ask why are the patches and expansions so consistently feeling too small? I think the real story is this. that ArenaNet has acclimated their player base to have certain expectations of what a patch should be, and the bar for that is so high due to ArenaNet's own admirable ambitions that they can't cheaply do a lot of story. They just can't. I really don't mean to keep going on about this game, it's just that I've been playing it a lot lately. This is true for a great many games. But if you look at something like Final Fantasy XIV, which has traditional quests, I don't really want to talk about that. FF14 forces all of its players to go through mind-numbing tedium and drudgery. Truly boring, awful, slow questing with barely any voice acting for like 20, 30, 40, 50 hours before the story even really starts going anywhere. And you might say, well, why the hell is that there? Well, one beautiful thing that comes from that is players are immediately accepting of a very low bar of storytelling forevermore going forwards. And now, for Final Fantasy XIV to properly flesh out its story beats, it can do it very cheaply, very quickly, and there can be a high quantity. So they spend a lot of time pissing about with minutiae that the players are forced to go through, and they don't begrudge it. They don't whine about it, because to them, that is the game. That is valid gameplay. Guild Wars 2, after all its years of development, can never do that, could never get away with it. The Guild Wars 2's community standards for what they will enjoy in a moment-to-moment experience of a patch is really high. It's not enough to do DRMs, which is basically just the game's combat. People get bored with that. You have to be shaken up in a lot of different ways. It's not enough to just have dialogue, just, you know, that's being thrown voice acted. It has to be broken up, the pace in a certain way. It's not enough to have just a cutscene every now and then. You've got to have them really pretty regularly. You can't force people to go through anything that's particularly long-term or grindy. People won't accept that. That's not what this MMO is about. And so what you really end up with is 2 to 3 hour patches. And 2 to 3 hour patches cannot deliver on this kind of world and this kind of world building that a lot of us story enthusiasts have been asking for. And that, for what it's worth, this discussion here, this is why Guild Wars 1 feels better, particularly with rose-colored glasses and nostalgia goggles on when you look back at it, because actually there's a lot that's really bad about Guild Wars 1, but it was able to have that breadth, again, because the standards were lower. And I think you can teach your audience to have low standards, but it's too late for Guild Wars 2 at this point. Again, another reason why moving to another game might be the thing to do. But now we're into that old familiar topic, not really related to the comments. So those are my honest feelings on it. And I'm sorry to use FF14 as an example. What I'm saying applies to an enormous amount of stuff. And probably even Elder Scrolls Online to a certain degree as well, which I'm extremely interested in. As far as I can tell, that's kind of kin to Guild Wars 2 in a lot of ways. And that's just as much on my sites as FF14 has been these past 2 months. Oh, and for what it's worth, back at your comment, you mentioned the idea of making the personal story feel like it had consequences, so it's cool to deal with the Flame Legion. Yeah, I agree with that. I actually think one thing that the devs could have done with the Icebreed Saga, just kind of a more minor criticism, is a lot of these new characters we're being introduced to. Like, especially if you look at characters like Krisha, I kind of wish that they just picked a random, inconsequential NPC from the Char personal story and had that character be the Krisha character and established we just didn't know that they'd had this prior relationship with Ritlock and stuff. You know, because that, again, would have, like, increased cohesion. I do know that they did go back and look at these characters, but they use them in, like, really minor ways. Like, you might find Dinky in the Drizzlewood coast. It's like, wow, you were a member of my warband. But to actually have them be in an eminent position, a forward position of the story, I think would have done a lot. But ArenaNet like inventing new characters. When you look at Season 1 and the introduction of Dragon's Watch, if they hadn't been entirely new constructions coming from the minds of the writers of Season 1, but had been pulled from random areas of the personal story, again, I think it would have alleviated a ton of issues people had. Because Season 1 didn't just have the issue of magicking up a bunch of new characters and stories and events. It didn't pull them from Guild Wars 2 as it really existed, and it didn't pull them from Guild Wars 1 either. That was a big criticism of that era that I haven't talked about much recently. But, you know, there was a very, very specific moment where the devs seemed to realize, oh, people like the old lore, we probably should continue looking at it. For a long time in that season, it felt like they didn't care about anything from the past at all. I don't know whether it's true, but that's how it felt. As I say, this video is about weird comments. Check this out. I don't know, is this true? I could just go in game and check, but I want to platform this for all of you guys. Let's get some comments on this. Drewark, with 10 thumbs up, says, with the comment about bubbles in the end of Dragon's trailer, if you stayed longer at the end of the Dragonstorm event, Bubbles of magic start to fill the air from where the two dragons die. Wait long enough and the bubbles will go to the sky and start floating over mountaintops, heading south. And Paddy says, is this true? Is this true? I had not noticed this. If this absolutely is, I mean, I'll keep an eye out when I'm done shooting this video. You might see that as footage in the background. That would be a nice little hint and something that would definitely bump up the quality of the patch. I'll latch onto that if that is real. You guys got any thoughts on that? I mean, it's pretty clear it's another deep sea dragon hint at that point. Nixas says, what if the dragons, like you said about Primordus, could rebirth itself? Morgemoth tried to do that to Trahearn, right? What if they both come back in another place? I know Aurene says that they're both dead, but at the same time, she didn't get all of their magic, question mark. All right, so here we are. We're in the denial stage of grief, I think. I've seen a few comments to this effect. Let's talk about this. I don't think they're going to retcon it. I don't think they're going to redo it. I don't think that they're going to magic out a reason that says that these two are actually still alive. I do have another comment, which is an amazing idea we'll get to in a second. Kind of along these lines. But no, I don't expect this. And I especially don't expect this because that using like the Trahearn thing as precedent or whatever. So what are you saying? Morgemoth died. They grabbed some of Morgemoth's magic and ability to reproduce in that way. So now we have to do kind of a similar thing. But to lean on that Trahearn idea sounds nice until you remember that if you start thinking about the Trahearn thing, it's going to make people question why Bram isn't still like Destroyer-esque. And why he just gets a free win here. I mean, the answer then has to be, oh, well, Aurene did it. And we go back to this idea of, like, these vague notions of what these dragons are actually capable of and what they're actually doing and what Aurene's power level is and stuff. So I think they're just going to move on from it, guys. I think it is what it is. There is no rabbit to pull out of a hat here. There will be no budget or funding to redo this story. It is what it is. We have to live with it. That is, unless Mike Broom has something to say. WP, I can fix everything. Next week, another patch is released. It was all a Jormag mind manipulation, and we are just stuck in a block of ice, thinking that we won. End of Dragons. It's 30 years later, and an elderly Casimir has been working to thaw us out for years. Marjorie died during the Great Blizzard, and the rest of the group has left to go fight another dragon after fleeing Jormag's corruption. Time to go to Cantha and try and find Bram, Ritlock, and the others. And now it's old man Ritlock and he's all grey and stuff. Look, I won't deny, I think this would be a great story. And you guys would not believe the number of comments I've had the past few days of people saying, ArenaNet's trolling you, bro. It's all a trick. It's just like when Aurene came back to life, blah, 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 blah. The Aurene coming back to life thing's so funny for me because I never realized how many people genuinely thought Aurene was dead. Like, people say that that's a low point of the story, and it's really not for me. Because it was so clear she wasn't dead. It was so clear they were setting up the Joko revival. It was so clear they were talking about her ascension and her necessary death and all that stuff. It was, like, really well telegraphed, beautifully plotted. It wasn't meant to be a twist to a certain degree. I do acknowledge that it was a bit tacky, maybe, or icky, or a bit misaligned to try and play on the sadness of it between the two patches, right? And I know people are a bit angry about that. But I really don't think that ArenaNet was being too deceptive or stupid with that. But people did find that as just a sudden shock return. So, wow, maybe we'll do another shock return here. The dragons didn't die. It's all a conspiracy theory. It's just like this. I do not believe this conspiracy theory. I'm sorry, guys. It's a good idea. It really is. But, you know, especially after some of the discussion ArenaNet's had at their footsteps, you would have expected a little tweet or something where they say, this is not the end of Primordus and Jormag, or something really vague and non-committal, but just tips you off. I don't know. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine if in I'm not going to say next week, but can you imagine if in 3 weeks this actually happens? I mean, talk about getting egg on my face. I don't think I would have egg on my face in that situation. It would be a hell of a moment and an incredible trick to play on the whole community and risk the actual genuine reputation of your studio and have so many thousands of people saying, yeah, I'm probably not going to buy the next expansion now anymore, just in support of a narrative beat as ballsy as that. I mean, that would be true art. That would be incredible. I'd love to see it. I don't believe it, though. I'm sorry. Oh, speaking of conspiracy theories as well, guys. No, they probably didn't bring the forums down to try and suppress negative, discussion. I don't believe that whatsoever. They brought the forums down because they're upgrading all this stuff, probably in tandem with the Steam release. Let's not be too insane, yeah? And one final comment here, interesting concept, Saris Morosi. Something important is that this living story was not Season 5, but the Icebrood Saga. I expect early on, the idea was to have an Icebrood Saga and then a Destroyer Saga. And then only after have the showdown between the two dragons. They started Cantha halfway through though, and demanded the devs jam the Destroyer Saga and the showdown into that last half of the Icebrood Saga. I really like this idea. You know, I might be wrong on this, but I'm inclined to believe this one. It doesn't say... I know that the logo for the Icebrood Saga always had that, like, subtle other coloration in it. But to me, it's never really made sense. Even if we assume this thing was fully budgeted out and beautifully made, why is it called the Icebrood Saga if it is a Jormag v Primordus thing? Is it because you already used Flame and Frost back during Season 1 and you feel like it's going to be too confused with that now in terms of like branding or whatever? It can't be that. Is it because your original idea was to have Primordus' introduction be a real surprise? So much so that you would have a basically misrepresentative title. So I kind of believe this. So in tandem with this as well, guys, and I don't know how much, I can't really corroborate any of this yet. So take everything I'm about to say with a massive grain of salt. I'm seeing a lot of like rumor mongering comments and I'd really like some sources on it. But people in vague ways discussing the NCSoft didn't, they had some NCSoft head around the time of Season 4, when they made the decision not to do an expansion. Because remember, this decision should have come during Season 4. So after Path of Fire's release, the idea is that NCSoft told ArenaNet, you can't do expansions anymore. We want you to sell this game entirely as a live service. And so the idea was to never do expansions again, remember, because they already had this concept back in the day. And what they were probably going to do is like sell you elite specs alongside it. Like 20 quid for the next Warrior Elite spec right when Grothmar comes out, for example. Maybe these wouldn't even have been gem purchases, just like how expansions can't be bought with gems, right? You have to actually spend money. So it would have been this idea of packaging the game, and it would have been forever. Now, obviously, something happened and people got cold feet, but if you believe this whole idea, now think about this. Yeah, it would make sense that they'd be like, well, we've got all the time in the world if this is just how we do it. So let's do an Icebrood Saga. We have all the time in the world, so we can include some stories about centaurs and we can do the Char Civil War. We're excited about that. So yeah, let's put that in there. There's no reason why we shouldn't. And then maybe there were going to be 2 more maps, you know, 4 more releases, 2 more maps in the original idea of it. And then there would be a Destroyer Saga. I really do like the idea of a Destroyer Saga. And then after the Destroyer Saga, sometime in 2022, late 2021 maybe, that's when this conflict would happen. It would be right around now that the Destroyer Saga would be getting kicked up. You know, maybe they'd rent out another 100-year-old theater and do another announcement or whatever. But obviously we saw how the Icebrood Saga announcement went. ArenaNet themselves probably really didn't like the idea of selling elite specs and selling, you know, whatever their new mount idea would have been or whatever. And obviously there's been a lot of turbulence ever since. So this is kind of like one of the lines of speculation and theory about everything that might have gone on behind the scenes. And if you tie it all together, I think there's kind of a comprehensive view there. But obviously, we in the community are completely in the dark on this. So, hey, who knows? I might do a poll. I haven't done a poll for a few days, obviously. I might do a poll. Do you believe in the Destroyer Saga? So keep an eye out on my channel sometime right around when this video goes up. And we'll see what you guys think on that. There you go, guys. Thanks very much for watching. It's been a long end of Dragon's Daily. It's actually the second one in which I've just completely thrown caution to the wind and done way too long. But, you know, you got some good Drizzlewood footage in the background, hopefully, out of it. Give me your thoughts. I don't have a specific topic in mind. There's just so many comments to pick from and such a frenzy at the moment that I really don't need to go for a specific one. We'll have Concept Art 3 going out tomorrow as well, so anyone who wants to get the jump on that and talk about that, please feel free to. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the 2-hour balance video from last night as well, and I'll see you very soon for the next one. I got a graphics video. I want to get back on the whole tonic idea now that my PC is stable. And of course, especially now that this patch is dying down, I'm going to be looking at other games as well. So thanks, guys. See you soon.